My parents convinced me I was worthless from the day I could understand words, but what they did when I finally succeeded, despite them, destroyed any chance I had at a normal life forever. Growing up, I thought I was the problem. When your parents tell you every single day that you're a disappointment, that you ruined their perfect family, that they wish you'd never been born, you start to believe it. You start to think maybe they're right. Maybe you really are fundamentally broken. My older brother, Derek, was everything they wanted. Charming, athletic, naturally talented at everything he touched. Then there was me, 2 years younger, and apparently the mistake that destroyed their happiness forever. We should have stopped at one perfect child, my mother would say, while Derek was in earshot, making sure he heard how special he was. Some people just don't know when to quit while they're ahead. I lived my entire childhood walking on eggshells, desperately trying to earn even a fraction of the love they showered on Derek. When I brought home straight A's, they'd say I was just a grade grubber with no real intelligence. When Derek brought home B's, they'd celebrate his well-rounded approach to life. The double standards were everywhere. Derek could leave messes I had to clean up after both of us. Derek got new clothes, I got his hand-me-downs. Derek had friends over constantly, but when I asked to invite someone, they'd say the house was too busy. Derek's friends actually want to be here, my mother would explain. Your friends would just be coming out of pity. By high school, I was having panic attacks daily. I'd wake up feeling like I couldn't breathe, spend entire days convinced something terrible was about to happen. When I begged them to get me help, they refused. Nothing wrong with you that some discipline won't fix, my father said. Derek never had these problems because he doesn't wallow in self-pity. So I decided to prove them wrong through achievement. I studied obsessively, joined every academic club, volunteered hundreds of hours. My GPA was perfect. My test scores were in the 99th percentile. I got accepted to 3 Ivy League schools with full scholarships. Surely this would change everything. Surely they'd have to admit I was worth something. I was so naive. Scholarship kids always drop out, my mother said when I showed them the acceptance letters. You'll realize you don't belong there and come crawling back home. Oh, my father nodded. Derek didn't need handouts because he was genuinely talented. These schools probably just felt sorry for you. But I was determined to prove them wrong. I packed everything I owned in 2 suitcases and left for college 3 days after graduation, promising myself I'd never need them for anything again. College was like stepping into sunlight after living in a cave. Professors praised my work. Classmates sought out my opinions. For the first time in my life, people acted like I had value. I thrived academically, made dean's list every semester, got research positions that typically went to graduate students. But socially, I struggled. I couldn't understand why people wanted to be friends with me. I kept waiting for them to realize I was worthless and abandon me. You're really hard on yourself, my roommate Sarah commented after I had a breakdown over getting an A instead of an A+. Like, weirdly hard. Did something happen to you? I didn't know how to explain that praise felt foreign, that success felt temporary, that I was constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. How do you tell someone that your own parents spent 18 years convincing you that you were a mistake? I threw myself into therapy during sophomore year, finally ready to unpack the damage. Dr. Rodriguez helped me understand that what I'd experienced wasn't normal parenting, it was emotional abuse. Children need unconditional love to develop properly, she explained. When that's withheld, when love becomes conditional on impossible standards, it damages the child's ability to form healthy relationships and self-worth. I started to heal slowly. I learned to recognize my achievements as legitimate. I began to believe that maybe I wasn't fundamentally flawed. I even started dating, though trusting someone enough to let them close was terrifying. Senior year, I met Marcus in my advanced psychology seminar. He was kind, patient, and seemed genuinely interested in me as a person. When I graduated summa cum laude and got accepted to a top-tier graduate program, he was the first person to congratulate me. "You're incredible," he said, hugging me after the ceremony. "Your parents must be so proud." I looked across the crowd where my family was standing. Derek had driven up for graduation, bringing his girlfriend and my parents. They were taking pictures with him, laughing and celebrating. None of them had congratulated me. They'd barely acknowledged that it was my graduation. They're proud of Derek for getting his bachelor's degree in 5 years with a 2.8 GPA, I told Marcus quietly. I just got summa cum laude and they act like I did the bare minimum. Marcus looked shocked. That can't be right. You're valedictorian. You're going to get your PhD at Stanford. How could they not be? Because they've spent my entire life making it clear that nothing I do will ever be good enough, I interrupted. That night at dinner, my parents spent the entire meal talking about Derek's new job and his girlfriend. My graduation, my awards, my fellowship to Stanford, none of it came up. When Marcus tried to steer the conversation toward my achievements, my mother actually looked annoyed. "Let's not make everything about academics," she said dismissively. "Some people need constant validation for doing what they're supposed to do." I saw Marcus's face change as he realized I hadn't been exaggerating about my family dynamics. After dinner, he pulled me aside. "That was fucked up," he said quietly. "The way they treat you is not normal." "I know," I said. "That's why I'm leaving for California next month." Graduate school was even better than undergrad. I found my passion in developmental psychology, specifically studying the long-term effects of childhood emotional neglect. My research was groundbreaking, my professors called me brilliant, and I finally started to believe that maybe I really was intelligent. I stayed in California after getting my PhD, building a successful practice as a child psychologist. Marcus and I got married, bought a house, and started talking about having kids. For the first time in my life, I felt genuinely happy. But my parents still had the power to destroy me with just a few words. It happened when I was 28. I'd just been offered a position as department head at a prestigious children's hospital, a job that would make me one of the youngest department heads in the hospital's history. It was the culmination of everything I'd worked for. I was so excited that I made the mistake of calling home to share the news. "Mom, I got the promotion," I said when she answered. "I'm going to be running the entire child psychology department." There was a long pause. "That's nice, dear. It's a huge deal," I continued, deflating slightly. "I'll be overseeing a team of 12 psychologists. They're trusting me to rebuild their entire program." "Well, let's hope you can handle the responsibility," she said. "Management isn't for everyone." "Mom, I've been managing research teams for 3 years. My publications have been cited over 500 times. I'm literally being headhunted by the best hospitals in the country." "Oh, that's so much. Another pause. "If you say so, dear." Derek just got promoted to regional manager, by the way. His boss says he's the most natural leader they've ever seen. I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, the same panic I'd felt as a teenager. Even now, even with all my success, they could still make me feel worthless in seconds. "I have to go," I said, hanging up before she could respond. Marcus found me crying in our bedroom an hour later. "What happened?" he asked, sitting beside me. "I called them about the promotion," I sobbed. "I don't know why I thought this time would be different." "What did they say?" "Nothing. Everything. They acted like it was no big deal and then immediately started talking about Derek's promotion. Like mine didn't matter at all." Marcus held me while I cried, but I could see the anger in his eyes. He'd been encouraging me to cut contact with my family for years, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Some part of me still hoped that eventually they'd see my worth. That hope was about to be completely destroyed. The call came on a Tuesday evening. My father's voice was strained, different from his usual dismissive tone. "Your mother's in the hospital," he said without preamble. "Heart attack. It's serious." I was on a plane the next morning, leaving behind important meetings and patient appointments. Despite everything, she was still my mother. I still loved her, even though she'd never loved me back. The hospital waiting room was tense. Derek was there with his wife. My father looked exhausted, and extended family members I rarely saw were gathered in small groups. When I walked in, several relatives hugged me and commented on how successful I'd become. "We're so proud of you," my Aunt Linda said. "A department head at such a young age. Your parents must be bursting with pride." I glanced at my father, who was staring at his hands. Derek looked uncomfortable. "She's always been the academic one," Derek said dismissively. "Some people compensate for lacking social skills by hiding in books." The casual cruelty still took my breath away. Here I was, having dropped everything to rush to my mother's bedside, and he was still putting me down in front of the family. But what happened next broke something in me that can never be fixed. My mother survived the heart attack, but the recovery was going to be long. While she was still in the ICU, heavily sedated, I overheard my father talking to Derek in the hallway. "We need to discuss the will," my father said quietly. This was a wake-up call. "Is Mom going to be okay?" Derek asked. "The doctors think so, but we need to be realistic about the future. Your mother and I have been talking about this for years. We want to make sure everything goes to someone who'll appreciate it." I pressed myself against the wall, straining to hear. "What about Sarah?" Derek asked, using my name for the first time in years instead of just calling me she or your sister. My father laughed, actually laughed. "Sarah doesn't need our help. She's got her fancy job and her husband's money. Besides, she's never really been part of this family, not like you." "I don't know, Dad. She did rush back here when Mom got sick, because she likes being seen as the good daughter. It's all for show, like everything else she does. Getting those degrees, that job, even getting married, it's all just her trying to prove she's better than us." The words hit me like physical blows. They thought my success was fake. They thought my love for them was performative. After everything I'd achieved, everything I'd overcome, they still saw me as the worthless mistake who ruined their perfect family. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came when my father continued. "Besides, we've decided to give everything to Derek anyway. The house, the investments, your mother's jewelry, all of it. Sarah gets nothing." "Nothing?" Derek sounded surprised. "Isn't that a little harsh?" "She made her choice when she moved across the country and only calls on holidays. You're the one who stayed close, who visits regularly, who actually cares about family. Why should we reward someone who abandoned us?" I wanted to scream. I'd moved away because they made it clear I wasn't wanted. I only called on holidays because every other call ended with them telling me how disappointing I was. I'd spent my entire adult life trying to build a relationship with them despite the constant rejection. But the final blow was still coming. "Plus," my father said, lowering his voice even more, "let's be honest. Sarah was never really our daughter the way Derek is our son. She was always different, always difficult. Sometimes I wonder if the hospital mixed up the babies. They actually wondered if I was switched at birth. They'd rather believe I wasn't biologically theirs than accept that they'd failed me as parents. I stood in that hospital hallway, listening to my father essentially disown me while my mother lay unconscious nearby, and something inside me finally broke completely. I walked back to the waiting room, collected my purse, and approached Derek. "I'm going back to California," I said calmly. "But Mom still—" "Tell her I hope she recovers fully," I interrupted. "And tell Dad that I heard his conversation about the will. He doesn't need to worry about leaving me anything. I wouldn't want it." Derek's face went pale. "Sarah, wait." But I was already walking away. I drove straight to the airport and caught the next flight home. Marcus was waiting for me when I got back, having sensed from my texts that something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked. I told him everything about the conversation, about the will, about them questioning whether I was even their biological child. "I'm done," I said when I finished. "I'm completely done trying to earn their love. They've made it clear that nothing I do will ever be enough." "I'm sorry," Marcus said, holding me. "I'm so sorry they put you through this." "The worst part is that I still love them," I sobbed. "Even after everything, I still love them and want their approval. How fucked up is that?" Marcus didn't have an answer, and honestly, neither did I. I changed my phone number the next day and blocked them on all social media. When they tried to contact me through relatives, I politely but firmly asked my extended family not to share information about my life with my parents or Derek. "But they're your family," my Aunt Linda protested when I called to explain my decision. "No," I said. "Family is supposed to love and support you. These people have spent my entire life trying to convince me I'm worthless. I'm not doing it anymore." It took 2 years of intensive therapy to even begin processing the damage. Dr. Rodriguez helped me understand that what I'd experienced wasn't just neglect. It was systematic psychological abuse designed to destroy my self-worth. "Your parents used a technique called scapegoating," she explained. "They designated you as the problem child while idealizing your brother. It's a form of emotional abuse that can cause lifelong damage to your ability to trust, form relationships, and maintain self-esteem." "But I've been successful," I protested. "I have a good marriage, a good career. I'm not damaged." "Success doesn't mean you're not damaged," she said gently. "You're high-functioning, but the damage is still there. You still question your worth, still need constant validation, still panic when people get close to you. Those are all symptoms of childhood emotional trauma." She was right. Despite all my achievements, I was still that little girl desperately trying to earn love from parents who would never give it. I still felt like a fraud waiting to be exposed. I still couldn't fully believe that Marcus loved me for who I was, rather than what I could do for him. The breakthrough came during a particularly difficult session, about 3 months after I'd cut contact with my family. "I keep waiting for Marcus to leave," I admitted. "Every time we have a fight or I make a mistake, I think this is it. This is when he realizes I'm not worth the trouble." "Where do you think that fear comes from?" Dr. Rodriguez asked. "Because that's what love felt like growing up. Conditional, temporary, something that could be taken away the moment I failed to meet impossible standards." "And what does that tell you about your parents' love?" I was quiet for a long time. Finally, I said, "It wasn't really love at all, was it?" "What do you think?" "Real love doesn't have conditions. Real love doesn't disappear when someone disappoints you. Real love doesn't require you to earn it by being perfect." "So, what did your parents give you instead of love?" "Approval, sometimes, when I did exactly what they wanted. But approval isn't love." That realization was both liberating and devastating. Liberating because it meant their rejection wasn't really about me. They weren't capable of real love. Devastating because it meant I'd spent my entire childhood trying to earn something they didn't have to give. My career continued to flourish. I published papers on childhood emotional trauma that became required reading in graduate programs. I spoke at conferences about the long-term effects of parental scapegoating. Ironically, my own trauma had made me exceptionally good at helping other people heal from similar experiences. But personally, I struggled. Marcus and I tried to have children, but I miscarried twice. Each loss sent me into a spiral of self-blame and depression. "Maybe I'm not meant to be a mother," I told Dr. Rodriguez after the second miscarriage. "Maybe I'm too damaged to create a healthy family." "Do you really believe that?" she asked. "I don't know how to love unconditionally," I admitted. "What if I repeat the patterns I grew up with? What if I scapegoat my own child the way my parents scapegoated me?" "The fact that you're worried about that tells me you won't," she said. "Abusive parents don't question their behavior. They don't seek therapy to break cycles. They don't spend years learning to recognize and heal from trauma." We eventually decided to explore adoption instead of continuing to try for biological children. The process was long and emotionally draining, but we were finally matched with a little girl named Emma, whose birth mother was too young to care for her. Emma was 3 when she came to live with us, and she'd already experienced more trauma than any child should. Her birth mother had been addicted to drugs, her biological father was unknown, and she'd been in several foster homes before being placed with us. "She's going to need a lot of patience," the social worker warned us. "Children who've experienced early trauma often have difficulty trusting new caregivers." But Emma and I understood each other in a way that surprised everyone, including me. When she had nightmares, I knew exactly how to comfort her. When she lashed out in anger, I recognized the fear underneath. When she tested boundaries, I understood she was checking to see if we'd abandon her like everyone else had. "You're really good at this," Marcus observed one evening after I'd successfully calmed Emma down from a meltdown. "I I know what it feels like to think you're not worthy of love, I said simply. Emma's adoption was finalized on her 5th birthday, and for the first time in my life, I understood what unconditional love actually felt like. I loved this little girl not because she was perfect, not because she earned it, but simply because she existed, and she was mine. I love you, Mama, she said one night as I was tucking her into bed. I love you too, sweetheart, I replied. Always and forever, no matter what. Even if I'm bad, especially if you're having a hard day, I said, kissing her forehead. My love for you isn't something you have to earn. It's just there, like the air you breathe. As Emma grew older and more secure in our family, I began to see the stark contrast between the mother I'd become and the parents I'd had. When Emma brought home a bad grade, we worked together to figure out what went wrong. When she struggled with friendships, we talked through strategies. When she made mistakes, we used them as learning opportunities rather than evidence of fundamental character flaws. You're such a good mom, Emma told me when she was 8, after I'd helped her work through a conflict with a classmate. Thank you, sweetheart. What makes you say that? My friend Katie's mom yells at her when she makes mistakes, but you help me fix things instead of getting mad. It broke my heart to realize that even at 8, Emma could recognize the difference between healthy and unhealthy parenting. I wondered what my life might have looked like if I'd had even one parent who'd responded to my struggles with support instead of criticism. When Emma was 10, I made the mistake of looking up my family on social media. I'd been strong about maintaining no contact for almost 6 years, but curiosity got the better of me. Derek now had 2 children and seemed to be living the perfect suburban life my parents had always wanted. The photos showed happy family gatherings, vacations, birthday parties, all the things I'd never experienced as a child. My mother had apparently recovered fully from her heart attack and looked healthy in recent pictures. She was grandmother of the year to Derek's kids, showering them with the affection she'd never shown me. I found myself staring at a photo from Derek's daughter's birthday party. My parents were beaming at their granddaughter, their faces full of the love and pride I'd searched for my entire childhood. They were capable of love, I realized with a shock. They just chose not to give it to me. That realization was somehow worse than thinking they were incapable of love at all. It meant my childhood wasn't the result of their limitations, it was the result of their choice to withhold love from me specifically. I spiraled hard after that discovery. The progress I'd made in therapy felt meaningless. If they could love Derek's children unconditionally, why couldn't they love me? What was so fundamentally wrong with me that my own parents couldn't bring themselves to care about me? Marcus found me crying in our bedroom later that evening. I looked them up, I confessed. They look so happy with Derek's kids. They're loving grandparents to children they've known for a few years, but they couldn't love me after raising me for 18 years. That says everything about them and nothing about you, Marcus said firmly. You know that, right? Do I? Because there has to be a reason. There has to be something about me that made them incapable of loving me. The reason is that they're abusive people who needed a scapegoat, Marcus said. It could have been any child. It happened to be you because you were younger, more sensitive, easier to isolate. But it wasn't because you deserved it. Dr. Rodriguez helped me work through the setback, but it took months to regain my equilibrium. The knowledge that my parents were capable of love but had chosen to withhold it from me was somehow more traumatic than the original abuse. This is actually progress, she told me during one particularly difficult session. You're finally seeing the situation clearly instead of making excuses for their behavior. It doesn't feel like progress, I said. It feels like everything I believed about myself was confirmed. I really am unlovable. You're a loving mother, a successful professional, and a caring wife, she pointed out. How can you believe you're unlovable when you're surrounded by people who love you? Because the people who were supposed to love me most in the world couldn't do it, I said. If your own parents can't love you, what does that say about your fundamental worth as a person? It says your parents were damaged people who should never have had children, she replied firmly. It says nothing about your worth. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are 2 different things. Even now, years later, I still struggle with the belief that I'm fundamentally flawed. When Emma achieves something, or when Marcus expresses pride in me, part of me still can't quite believe it's genuine. The final blow came when Emma was 12. I'd been doing well, feeling stable and healthy, when I got a call from my cousin Jennifer. I thought you should know, she said carefully. Your dad had a stroke last week. He's in intensive care. Despite everything, my first instinct was to book a flight home. He was still my father, and some part of me still hoped that facing mortality might make him realize what he'd lost by rejecting me. Are you sure you want to do this? Marcus asked when I told him about the call. I need to, I said. I need to know that I tried everything, that I don't have any regrets. What if they hurt you again? Then at least I'll know for certain that I did everything I could. The hospital was exactly as I remembered from my mother's heart attack 6 years earlier. Derek was there with his wife and children. My mother looked older but still elegant, and the same extended family members filled the waiting room. When I walked in, conversation stopped. My Aunt Linda looked surprised but pleased to see me. Sarah, we weren't sure if you'd heard. How is he? I asked, genuinely concerned despite everything. Stable, Derek said stiffly. The doctors think he'll recover, but it'll take time. My mother looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. You came. Of course I came, I said. He's my father. What happened next destroyed any remaining hope I had for reconciliation. My mother stood up and walked over to me. For a moment, I thought she might hug me, might acknowledge that I'd dropped everything to be there for them again. Instead, she looked me up and down with obvious disdain. "You look older," she said coldly. "I suppose all that stress from trying to prove you're better than everyone finally caught up with you." The casual cruelty took my breath away. I'd flown across the country to be there for my father's medical emergency, and her first words to me in 6 years were an insult about my appearance. "Mom," Derek said uncomfortably. "She came to see Dad." "Did she?" my mother asked, turning to face me directly. "Or did she come to make herself look good in front of the family? You always did love being the center of attention." I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, the panic response I'd developed as a child when faced with their criticism. But this time, I also felt something else. Clarity. "I came because I thought maybe facing mortality would help you realize that you have 2 children, not just one," I said quietly. "I thought maybe you'd want to heal our relationship before it was too late." My mother laughed, actually laughed. "There's no relationship to heal. You made your choice when you cut us out of your life. You don't get to come back now and play the loving daughter. I cut contact because you spent my entire life telling me I was worthless," I said, my voice getting stronger. "I had 2 miscarriages, and it never occurred to you to reach out. I adopted a daughter, and you don't even know her name. I became department head at one of the best children's hospitals in the country, and you've never once said you're proud of me." "Because we're not proud of you," my mother said with shocking directness. "You're cold, selfish, and self-centered. You abandoned your family for a career and a man who probably only married you for your money." The words hit me like physical blows, but this time I didn't crumble. This time, I finally saw her clearly. "You're never going to love me," I said with sudden understanding. "It doesn't matter what I achieve or how hard I try. You're never going to see me as worthy of love." "Love has to be earned," she replied. "And you've never done anything to earn ours." "No," I said firmly. "Love doesn't have to be earned. That's the whole point. Parents are supposed to love their children unconditionally. The fact that you think love has to be earned tells me everything I need to know about why you failed as a mother." My mother's face went white with rage. "How dare you?" "I dare because I'm finally seeing you clearly," I interrupted. "You're not disappointed parents who tried your best. You're abusive people who chose to scapegoat one child while idealizing the other. And I'm done pretending otherwise." I turned to leave, but Derek caught my arm. "Sarah, wait, you're upset, but..." "I'm not upset," I said, pulling free. "I'm relieved. I finally understand that this was never about me. This was about them needing someone to blame for their own unhappiness." I walked out of that hospital for the last time, and I've never looked back. My father recovered from his stroke, I learned through my cousin. He and my mother continued their perfect life with Derek and his family. They never reached out to me, and I never reached out to them. But something fundamental had changed. I was no longer waiting for their love or approval. I was no longer hoping they'd realize their mistake and apologize. I finally understood that they were incapable of giving me what I needed, and that wasn't my fault. The damage, however, was permanent. Dr. Rodriguez helped me understand that children who experience early emotional trauma often struggle with lifelong effects, even after extensive therapy. "You've made incredible progress," she told me during one of our sessions. "But some wounds are too deep to fully heal. That doesn't mean you can't have a good life, just that you'll always carry some scars." She was right. Even now, decades later, I still struggle with self-worth. I still need constant reassurance from Marcus that he loves me. I still panic when Emma is upset with me, terrified that I've somehow damaged her the way my parents damaged me. "You're not your parents," Marcus reminds me regularly when I spiral into self-doubt. "Look at Emma. Look at how confident and secure she is. That's because of you, because of the love you give her." He's right. Emma is thriving. She's confident, outgoing, academically successful, and emotionally healthy. She trusts that she's loved unconditionally, something I never experienced as a child. But the irony isn't lost on me. I've spent my entire career helping other people heal from childhood trauma, yet I've never fully healed from my own. I can give Emma the unconditional love I never received, but I can't convince myself that I'm worthy of receiving that same love. The type of bad parenting I experienced, systematic emotional abuse disguised as high standards, creates damage that may never fully heal. When parents convince a child that love must be earned through perfection, when they withhold affection as punishment, when they openly favor one child while scapegoating another, they create wounds that last a lifetime. I'm successful by any external measure. I have a loving marriage, a wonderful daughter, a meaningful career, but I still wake up some mornings feeling like that little girl who could never be good enough for her parents to love. The difference is that now I understand it wasn't really about me. Some parents are simply incapable of love, and children who grow up with them carry that damage forever. We can learn to manage it, to build good lives despite it, but we never completely recover. That's the truth no one wants to acknowledge. Some types of bad parenting create permanent damage. We pretend that therapy can fix everything, that love can heal all wounds, that resilience is enough to overcome any childhood trauma. But it's not true. Some of us will spend our entire lives trying to convince ourselves we're worthy of love, fighting against voices in our heads that tell us we're fundamentally flawed. We can build successful careers, healthy relationships, and loving families, but we'll always be working a little harder than everyone else just to feel normal. And sometimes that has to be enough.